Hey guys, today we're breaking down the insane details in My Hero Academia chapter 283, some of which were really easy to miss. Last week I did a spoiler review of this chapter, but this video right here is more of an analysis of certain details that I thought were pretty interesting. To start things off, this chapter picks up where chapter 280 left off, when the pro heroes were flying in to take down Gigantomachia. This includes the likes of Sun Eater, Gang Orca, Majestic, and several others. At this moment when they were flying in, Machia had just taken the drug which Momo created, and the intention was that it would put him to sleep. However, in this chapter, we see that his rampage has only gotten worse, and he's activated a previously unknown transformation quirk. Looking at his hands here, he has these enormous claws on each finger, which are perfect for just tearing up the surrounding environment around him. When we compare these hands to what his hands look like in previous chapters, I mean, he definitely has way more destructive capability now than he did back then. In addition, we see a ton of students were directly in his path, not to mention Gang Orca, who seems to be flung around like a ragdoll. Whilst the students were lifted to safety by Majestic, we see this wave of destruction approaching the magic hero. Honestly, I think there's a 0% chance that he has survived this, but his sacrifice, it kind of reminds me of that moment in Man of Steel when Superman's dad died. I don't know, it just really reminds me of that. When we look at this landscape, the students who were saved by Majestic were brought over to this location, and then the remaining heroes were caught up in Machia's destructive path over here. If they can survive that, then good job, because it wouldn't have been easy. But as I said in my Q&A the other day, I expect that many of these heroes will not make it. Really hoping that Tamaki survives though, above everyone else, because if he doesn't, I mean, Mirio is just going to be on the warpath. He is not going to stop until Shigaraki is dead, till Maki is dead. He would even fight them quirkless, I bet. Another interesting thing to note is Tokoyami using Dark Shadow to keep a bunch of medics safe from all the falling rocks caused by Machia. Way back in chapter 273, which is 10 chapters ago now, Fagum saw Tokoyami and Hawks and told them where the medics were, so that explains why they're at this medical site. If you look at the doctors themselves, I mean, they're pretty much identical, either that or they all have to be bald for some reason, but my assumption is that there's just one medic and he has a quirk that lets him split himself into many copies, possibly that, or Horikoshi just couldn't be bothered to draw different looking medics. I mean, either way, it works. Before we move on to the next thing, I need to point out that Mushroom Girl from Class 1B, I mean, she asks a very relevant question, which is, shouldn't the sedative have kicked in by now? Previously, we never had a concrete timeline as to how long the drug would take, right? So we knew that it was implied that he'd fall asleep pretty quickly, and then obviously Momo said it would kick in the faster Machia moves around. Well, now we have confirmation from Mushroom Girl, just straight up, it should have worked by now, it should have kicked in. So that is our confirmation right there. Couple that with the fact that now Machia, he's stronger than ever, and he's got this, his arms, his hands are transforming into these giant claws. He's never been more scary than he is right now. So make of that what you will. The drug should have kicked in. Maybe it has, but it's just not the drug we think. I know many people do not want to believe Momo is the traitor, and you know what? I don't want to believe it either. I don't think she has to be, but until this drug has the intended effect that it was supposed to have, or that we were told it was supposed to have, I can't just drop it. It is possible she is the traitor. Anyway, perhaps one of the most interesting details of this chapter was the different expressions we see from the League of Villain members. As Machia tears through a city, killing thousands of innocent people in the process, we get a look at Spinner's face, and that face to me is someone who's really considering if they're doing the right thing. We saw back in the Overhaul arc that Spinner, back then, he questioned whether the villains are following Stain's ideals, and this is another one of those moments. Would Stain really want Gigantomachia, killing all these people and destroying cities in the process? Would Stain want that? I don't think so. That makes it all the more hilarious to compare Spinner's face to Dabi's face, because if you guys remember, Dabi is also a loyal follower of Stain, and when you look at his face, he's just radiating with happiness with all this carnage. Many chapters ago, Dabi said to Hawks that he would be the one to make Stain's will a reality. Well, yeah, I doubt this is Stain's will, but whatever. Going back to the main battlefield now, Deku and Bakugo have an interaction that was totally different from what I thought it was. So what happened was, Deku shoots off away from Bakugo and towards Shigaraki, and last week I thought, this is what the translation said, I thought Bakugo was calling out to him, kinda, telling him not to sacrifice his life going up against the demon that is Shigaraki. But instead, the panel starts with Bakugo being left in the dust, not even knowing what to say, and then when he does say something, he just curses in frustration. This makes it seem like he's more concerned about being left behind by Deku in terms of their growth as a hero. As rivals, they always want to one-up each other, but it seems that Bakugo is now beginning to realize that Deku is just that little bit better than him. Remember, nearly 10 chapters ago, Bakugo was monologuing about how he isn't going to be left behind and how he can't afford to lose to Deku, not to mention the fact that he took issue with Midoriya being the main character, as he called it. This just seems like he's taking issue with Deku surpassing him more than anything else, but do let me know what you guys think on this one. Is he concerned about Deku, or is it a mixture of both? Is he both concerned and also upset that Deku is overtaking him? Another cool detail was related to Shigaraki, and if you've read the chapter, you'll know that his body finally began to suffer some blowback for using all of this power despite being woken up at just 75% completion. The moment when he suffers the blowback from his quirk, it's a bit too gory for me to show right now, but let's just say his right arm is hanging like some kind of ripped teddy bear. As Deku approaches, Shiggy asks him what the date is, which is confirmation that this whole time, Shigaraki didn't actually know he'd been woken up early. I don't know about you guys, I just assumed he already knew, because it's not like the heroes were going to show up coincidentally on the exact day you were meant to come out. And also we got to remember that Shigaraki woke up on the ground instead of inside his tank. That should have been a dead giveaway. But yeah, for whatever reason, Shigaraki never realized that he'd been let out of the tank early, and so he was asking Deku about the date because he was trying to work out, am I at 100%? Probably not. Undeniably though, the best moment of this chapter was Deku activating his third quirk, which is known as Float. As most of you know, this was possessed by Nana Shimura, who was the 7th holder of One For All, and one thing that was really clear in the official chapter release was exactly how he was using Black Whip in tandem with this new ability. We can see that he's floating in the air and using his left arm to hold up the heroes, including Ryukyu, who is now back into her human form, with her arm just being totally messed up after Shigaraki did some serious damage when she was in her dragon form. One thing you may not have noticed though, is that in Deku's right arm, he's using Black Whip to yank Shigaraki into the sky. What this means is that perhaps the decay that Shigaraki was about to unleash, well, now that he's in the air, maybe that's stopped, which is good news for heroes like Mirko and Present Mike, who had literally no way of avoiding the destruction if it was to come. Also, by pulling Shigaraki with his right hand, he's kind of keeping the villain separate from everyone else. Some of you might have been surprised that Deku activated Float without talking to Nana Shimura in some way, but when I looked back at chapter 210, which is when Black Whip was first introduced, it wasn't until 2 chapters later that Deku spoke to the 5th user of One For All. In this situation, I reckon it might be a similar thing, in that Nana Shimura reaches out to him within a few chapters. We saw how the first user of One For All was able to talk to Deku, despite the fact that Deku wasn't sleeping, he wasn't brainwashed or anything like that, so I reckon Nana Shimura can do the same thing. The last thing to mention on this chapter is that the name of the chapter is 75, and while this refers to Shigaraki, it does also refer to Deku and his use of both Black Whip and Float at the same time. As we know, Float was formerly possessed by the 7th user, and Black Whip was formerly possessed by the 5th user. So 75, it has 2 different meanings in this sense. One that refers to Deku and his multiple quirks, and one that refers to Shigaraki and him coming out of the tank earlier. But with all that said, those were the details that you may have missed in chapter 283. Don't forget to sub, and please like this video and share it around if you liked it. And don't forget that part 3 of my War Arc review should be out later this week. Peace out.